Jeff, it's nice to see you here today. Dr. Albanese, it's also nice to see you. I know you guys were telling me to focus my topics when I was first coming to you, saying I wanted to say that capitalism was the root of all evil. So luckily for you, I mean, I focused it. So here we are today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the presentation on Black internalized and interracial oppression. My name is Aaliyah Smith, and today will be discussing the methods and findings of my research study on the internalization of racial oppression within the Black American community. First, we will discuss our understanding of interracial discrimination. Next, we will talk about the research methods and findings of this concept. Then, we will discuss what this means and how we can intervene. Let's first talk about our definition of interracial discrimination. Interracial discrimination refers to discriminatory behavior or attitudes exhibited within the same racial group. Remarks or behavior can be microaggressive in nature and perpetuate harmful stereotypes and biases. Examples include colorism, texturism, and the fear of Black bodies within the Black community. One participant would define the phenomenon as unconscious assessment of one another that results in deeming a Black person as less able, less intelligent, less capable, less refined, and less dignified. Another participant says, whenever you have some negative doubts that change your decision about saying yes to a Black person, which can take form in a variety of ways. Interracial discrimination is essentially the projection of indoctrination. The behavior and attitudes adopted and internalized by racially oppressed groups is a result of colonial structures and systemic racism that buttress the colony and its ideologies. Colonialization as a historical process has had enduring effects on the psyche, social structures, and cultural dynamics of colonized peoples. Internalized racial oppression is a phenomenon that impacts not only self but society. In the case of Black Americans, the legacy of slavery, segregation, and ongoing systemic racism can be transformed into internal colonization, wherein oppressive ideologies and power structures have been internalized and perpetuated within the community. Essentially, I wanted to determine the little things that we say in passing that have big meaning. I really wanted to look at this more closely because one summer, I played outside all day long. We had a swimming pool in our backyard. And I remember going back inside and my family being amused at how dark I had gotten. And I went to school and got the same reaction. And it's a memory that's obviously been etched in my brain and led me to this very moment. So now, what are we saying to each other that reflect racist ideology, and how does it impact our collective identity and cultural connection? I use an intersectional approach to answer these questions. Symbolic interactionism, colonial theory, critical race theory, and bodies out of place theory were the frameworks used to address the research question. Symbolic interactionism underscores the significance of social interactions and societal messages in shaping individuals' sense of self. Colonialism offers us historical context to understand contemporary interactions. Critical race theory emphasizes systemic racism as a central factor in perpetuating self-hate, illustrating how societal structures uphold white supremacy and devalue Black identity. Bodies out of place theory explores the policing and dehumanization of Black bodies in white-dominated spaces, illuminating how structural inequalities contribute to the internalization of negative perceptions about Black identity. Through intersecting identities and stories, my research aims to empower the Black community and address misconceptions to promote cultural competence and foster inclusivity. Research methods. So the initial phase of data analysis involved quantitative examination of survey responses using statistical tools in SPSS. Secondly, my research involved conducting interviews and a focus group discussion using Microsoft Teams. The final stage of analysis involved qualitative analysis of the interview and focus group transcripts using thematic analysis to identify patterns and themes. My mixed methods approach aimed to capture the lived experiences that surveys might overlook, focusing on narratives and social dynamics within the Black community. The findings shed light on individual and shared experiences of intra-racial discrimination and internalized racial oppression. First, let's discuss the survey. The survey demographic profile consists of a homogeneous sample of 25 participants, all identifying as Black or African American. The age range spans from 30 to 60 and older, with the majority falling between 30 and 39. Women constitute the majority of respondents at 84%. No one reported having less than a high school education. Educational backgrounds vary, with 36% holding professional degrees, 28% having a 4-year degree, and 24% completing some college. A minority held higher degrees, with 8% with having a doctorate, and then 4% had a 2-year degree. In terms of religious affiliation, the largest group reporting having no religion at 34.5%. Followed by Christianity at 31%, with other affiliations including inter/non-denominational and Islam and other various individual spiritual beliefs, including African spirituality, ancestral veneration, Ifa, belief in a creator, and interfaith African spirituality. A Likert scale measured perceptions related to competence, CM, traditions, TM, biased viewpoints of Black intellect, BVBI, belief in biased representations of history, BBRH, devaluation of African worldviews, DAW, alteration of physical appearance, APA, hair change, HC, beauty ideals, BIM, and sexuality, S. And internalized negative stereotypes, which is INSM. Descriptive statistics reveal a tendency to somewhat disagree with internalized negative stereotypes and biased historical representations, with neutrality towards conforming to beauty standards. For instance, the mean score for BVBI indicate a tendency to strongly disagree with biased viewpoints regarding the intellect of Black individuals, with a mean score of 1.34 and a standard deviation of 0.82. Similarly, participants demonstrated a strong association with African heritage and values, as indicated by a high mean score of 4.58 with a standard deviation of 0.58 for traditions measurements, or TM. Regarding linear regression analysis, I observed various correlation coefficients between the different variables. For instance, there was a strong positive correlation of 0.62 between BVBI and BIM, indicating a tendency for individuals who hold biased views about Black intellect to also adhere more strongly to Eurocentric beauty standards. Additionally, CM showed a moderate positive correlation of 0.49 with INSM, suggesting that perceptions of Black individuals' competence were moderately associated with the internalization of negative stereotypes. Similarly, there was a moderate positive correlation of 0.42 between BIM and INSM, indicating a relationship between adherence to Eurocentric beauty standards and the internalization of negative stereotypes. Although bivariate ordinal regression analysis indicated several positive correlations, very few were statistically significant at the 5% significance level. I found that participants tended to somewhat disagree with internalized negative stereotypes about Black individuals, reflected by a mean score of approximately 2.02 for INSM. Regarding physical appearance, or APA, respondents took a neutral stance with a mean score of about 3.67, indicating they were neither strongly inclined nor disinclined to conform to specific beauty standards. Concerning BBRH, participants somewhat disagreed with a mean score of approximately 2.44, indicating skepticism regarding biased historical views. In my examination, I explored the intricate connections between BBRH, S, sexuality, APA, and INSM within the Black American community. What emerged were nuanced patterns of correlation. For instance, while there was minimal correlation between INSM and both BBRH with a correlation coefficient of 0.009 and APA, a correlation coefficient of 0.0, a more significant relationship was found between BBRH and APA with a correlation coefficient of 0.53. This suggests that individuals who hold biased historical views are more inclined to feel the pressure to conform to conventional beauty standards. Conversely, there was negligible correlations between INSM and both APA with a coefficient of negative 0.034 and sexuality, a correlation coefficient of negative 0.041, indicating that internalized stereotypes have minimal impact on perceptions of beauty standards or sexuality. Interestingly, a notable finding emerged regarding the relationship between BBRH and S, with a moderate negative correlation with a correlation coefficient of negative 0.47. This suggests that skepticism towards biased historical views is associated with the decreased endorsement of discrimination based on sexual orientation. These results illuminate the complex interactions shaping internalized stereotypes and attitudes within the Black community. Now let's just discuss the qualitative findings, my favorite part. In the open-ended interviews, I garnered 5 participants from the surveys, 4 identifying as women and 1 as a man, who shared personal experiences of internalized and intraracial oppression. These interviews revealed themes such as intraracial enforcement of Eurocentric beauty standards with sub-themes of colorism, texturism, and featureism, skepticism of Black leadership and expertise, intraracial stereotyping, and discrimination based on non-traditional sex and sexuality. Reflecting on colorism, Carrie recalled discriminatory remarks during disagreements and negative perceptions of dark skin within the Black community. She said people used to weaponize darkness, saying things like, "We your Black self," or "I'm not as Black as you are." Another participant, Tiffany, highlighted societal preferences for lighter skin, which led to rejection in dating. Participants also described differential treatment based on skin tone within families, with fairer skin often favored. Texturism, or the preference for certain hair textures, was also discussed, with participants noting pressure to conform to Eurocentric hair standards and the ostracism faced when embracing natural hair. Kyrie questioned societal norms dictating neatness and professionalism, particularly for Black men, while Candace expressed apprehension about wearing natural hair due to family disapproval. The manifestation of featureism isn't as commonly weaponized as colorism and texturism. One participant did discuss hating her own Afrocentric features, and another noted the excursion of some Black people to procreate with non-Black people to produce babies with non-Afrocentric features. I found blatant skepticism of Black leadership and expertise in the interviews. A participant recalls teaching at an African-centered institute and constantly being met with opposition and disbelief. Another participant recalls a recent incident when her father put more emphasis on a white man's authority and compared it to if it were a Black man in the situation. She says there was a sense of urgency for the white man that would not be present for the Black man. Tiffany largely blames media for the buffoonish image of Black individuals, as Black people are never portrayed as having the full gamut of emotional expression. There were numerous reports about my participants' Blackness and how other Black people held them to stereotype caricatures. Some expressed disapproval of food stereotypes and party ethics, providing examples of chicken, watermelon, the assumption that one knows how to play certain games, or that one will be late to the gathering. Others disagreed with the popularized idea of Black athleticism and excellence. We don't all know how to do that, they say about basketball, rap, and dancing. Participants also shared their perceptions of unorthodox sex and sexuality. A couple participants referenced historical events as a cause of diverse sexual orientations, expressions, and perceptions of them in general. Tyree explained that some of the diasporas are less accepting of non-cis identities due to the act of seasoning during slavery as a means of dominance. Supporting this understanding is Jordan, who says a lot of men are not really allowed to be men due to sexual molestation. Other participants noted the exclusion of non-conforming identities in families because of the family's belief system. And finally, let's discuss the findings from the focus group. There were 7 participants present with 5 active contributors to the discussion. I included focus groups to bring joint attention to the penetrability of white supremacist ideologies on the African American mind. A lot of the same themes were explored in the focus group, including intra-racial enforcement of Eurocentric beauty standards, skepticism of Black leadership and expertise, and intra-racial stereotyping. But upon presenting a video to the focus group participants, the last 2 themes of intra-racial reappropriation of derogatory terms and interracial fear of Black bodies were discovered through participant reactions, reflections, and personal anecdotes shared during the discussion prompted by the video. Upon viewing the 5-minute YouTube clip of comedian Drewski's audition for the fictional record label Could Have Been Records, participants expressed their distaste for the reappropriation of the N-word. Candace noted that Black people's reaction to non-Black people saying the N-word should be the reaction had when Black people say it. She believes the N-word shouldn't be said at all, no matter how it's been repackaged and reclaimed, and that saying it could be a form of internalized racial oppression. The final theme found in my research is the fear of Black bodies. Participant Destiny noticed in the same clip how Drewski, the Black comedian and host of the record label, feared the Black auditionee as opposed to the man of Asian descent. She comments on how Drewski feared the Black man while simultaneously relying on Black men of the similar hue to protect him. Tiffany also recalls a moment when she feared a Black man's presence as she was stopped at a red light. And I personally remember a few years ago locking my car doors as a Black man walked in front of it. These findings underscore the intricate interplay of discrimination, identity, and societal narratives within the Black community, emphasizing the impact of internalized biases on navigating racial identity in contemporary society. Now, what does all of this mean? Confronting internalized racial oppression within the Black community requires a nuanced understanding of systemic inequalities and structural racism. My study reveals the pervasive nature and lasting impact of colonialism. Colonialism, with its legacy of exploitation, dehumanization, and cultural erasure, continues to shape societal norms, attitudes, and institutions. And as suggested by critical race theorists, the systems in place contribute to the intra-racial enforcement of Eurocentric beauty standards, skepticism towards Black leadership, and overall perpetuation of harmful stereotypes within the Black community. This understanding goes beyond individual attitudes and behaviors to recognize the deeply entrenched systems of power and privilege that perpetuate racial hierarchies. By acknowledging these broader social dynamics, interventions can address root causes rather than symptoms, leading to more sustainable and transformative change. Colonialism has left indelible marks on the psyche of Black individuals, contributing to the internalization of inferiority and the perpetuation of intraracial divisions. My study's findings not only highlight the ways in which colonial ideologies have been internalized and reproduced within the Black communities. The findings align with Barbara Harris Combs' bodies out of place theory, which is that suggests that prolonged exposure to these systems of oppression perpetuate cycles of self-doubt, division, and discrimination. Addressing these legacies requires not only individual healing and empowerment, but also collective efforts to challenge systemic injustices and create spaces for authentic self-expression and affirmation. When Black people are not properly equipped about the depths of racial oppression or their own history pre-slavery, they are prone to perpetuate harmful ideologies. When I asked my participants what they believed would combat internalized and interracial oppression, the response was overwhelmingly centered around education. They believe that with the proper education, one will find self-worth and see themselves and others as dignified. Tiffany encourages Black people to study their history because when she was first exposed to pre-slavery Africa as a young adult, it made her feel so powerful and so full of pride that she felt like and still feels like she can do anything. Another participant said, when you learn about the benefits of melanin, you start to appreciate it and yourself more. Encouraging individuals to delve into their cultural heritage and history can foster a sense of pride and self-worth. By understanding the richness of their roots and the resilience of their ancestors, Black people can build a stronger foundation for self-acceptance and empowerment. Embracing community was another suggestion to combat intra-racism. Participants emphasized the need to find one's own tribe and build with them. The study underscores the need for comprehensive educational initiatives that address systemic racism, promote cultural competence, and empower students to critically engage with issues of race and identity. Future directions may involve advocating for curriculum reforms that integrate diverse perspectives in history, including those of marginalized communities. Future directions may include initiatives that promote self-affirmation and positive identity development among Black individuals. This could involve culturally relevant interventions such as workshops, support groups, and mentoring programs aimed at fostering a sense of pride, resilience, and self-acceptance. If advocacy for curriculum reform fails, like the book bans and critical race theory being banned in schools, today, the Black community can still achieve long-term impact through community-based interventions that empower individuals to challenge internalized oppression and foster a sense of collective agency. Further directions may involve developing community-led programs focused on cultural education, identity affirmation, and healing from historical traumas. Thank you for your time.
Questions?
Looking at me. Of course, I have a question, but other people should start. I'm always the one to ask the first question. Okay, I've got a question. Great job. So just wondering, comparing your quantitative and two different forms of qualitative analysis, did you find any real differences? Did anything come up in the interviews or the focus group that kind of contradicted what you found in the quantitative analysis, or something that maybe was unexpected?
I found a lot more, like the enforcement of the Eurocentric beauty standards. There are a lot of people that moderately agreed to or disagreed to changing their physical appearance or wanting a physical appearance that represented whiteness or was closer to whiteness. But in the interviews, it was like a totally different story. It's like it was all centered around appearance. So that was a different that was a difference that I saw between those two.
Thank you.
Leah, I had kind of a similar question. And help me understand this. And great job, of course. Just like everyone, these are really good presentations. So in the data you collected, it seemed like at times people were looking inward and at times people were looking outward. And so they were focusing at times on their own internal perspective, but at other times what they see out in the world. And am I mistaken about that, or how did you how were you analyzing the sort of the focus that people were taking, whether they were looking at themselves, which it seems to me a lot of times when we look at ourselves, it's like, oh no, I haven't internalized that stuff, but I see it all around me, right? Or it's happened to me. Did you see something like that going on?
Well, there were a lot of kind of like distancing from like contributing to the intra-racial discrimination. But there were some people that also confessed and said, yeah, I've done this or I've thought this about certain people. But the research question was mainly focused on our relationships between people. So the internalization part was an aspect to explore because it's sort of I'm holding myself to these standards, so I'm going to project those standards onto you, you know. And so the way that I kind of looked, I addressed their own perceptions of themselves, and then I got into the well, how do you see this manifesting in the community, or have you ever said anything that resonates to these kind of sentiments, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does.
Oh, okay.
So, Aliyah, you started with intersectional approach to your study, but then when you describe your sample, you have very restricted age group, 30 to, is it 39? You also have similarly highly educated sample that is also less religious, I think, than the general Black community. So I'm wondering, how does intersectionality play out in this sample? And if you couldn't tap into that in this study, how would you redesign or modify this study to kind of capture how intersectional identities influence this internalized and sorry, my glasses is messing me up with that group. Oh no.
Oh no.
So sorry, Aliyah. Yeah, but how would you redesign your study is what I'm getting.
That's a great question. I thought a lot about that. Because of the time constraints that I had, and just the scale itself, it was very limited to older population. There were a lot of people that identified as women, not a lot of men took the study. But I do, if I ever re-embark on this journey again, I would like to explore the perspectives of non-binary individuals and transgender individuals, and just all sorts of people of the LGBT spectrum, because I think they will have more to say about this sexuality part of it all. Because I have people in my own family that are either transgender or gay or bi, what have you, and they face certain discrimination, but I'm not understanding that because I haven't lived their experiences, and I haven't sat down and had a conversation like, okay, so how is this actually impacting you and whatever. But yeah, that's a great question. I think that was a very limiting aspect of the study. But if I could have did it differently, I would have reached a lot of different audiences. Um, yeah.
I have a quick question. Aaliyah, you and I talked about, can you go back to your title
Yeah.
slide? And we've talked a little bit about the appropriateness of certain titles, right? And here in qualitative research, you often want to pull in your title from the quotes. And you certainly see that's what Aaliyah's done here. Black people don't do that as part of this larger quote that this woman was discussing. But there's another one that maybe fit a little bit better, but may not have been appropriate for a public audience. And so I just kind of wanted to open it up and see, you know, sometimes certain titles can be more controversial. And so, Aaliyah, I wanted you to first react to that and then see how other people think.
Well, as you noticed from earlier, I did change it to your suggestion. And the only reason I did this is because I feel like it does encapture all of it instead of just the, the profession part of it, because Black people don't listen to that type of music. Black people don't do this type of, activity or hobby or whatever. But the other quote that we were brainstorming is, "We don't use nigga doctors." And so I think that was kind of limiting because it only like looked at the profession of doctors, when yes, that is a, theme in my research, the skepticism of Black leadership and expertise, but it's not all encompassing. And I even asked ChatGPT to give me their opinion because I couldn't think of it. But anyway, so yeah, that's my thoughts on that. What about anybody else's?
So I'm not Black, but I have heard Black people don't do that many times in a lot of different ways. So I think that's a fair point, except I think I agree with Eddie that the other title actually gets at the core concept that you're critiquing and you're drawing attention to. Having said that, I probably wouldn't use it either. But it's gotta be like in the text itself.
Yeah, it was definitely a quote.
And that's how you should have responded. You should have dropped that line to respond to me.
All right. Any more questions? We're at 5:05, so yeah. I think we're done.
Yay!
All right, good work, everybody, and you all survived.
It wasn't as bad.